So now we look at the actual texts here in this chapter on the bringer of light, and the first one is called One Person. So here he says, monks, there is one person who arises for the welfare of the multitude, for the happiness of the multitude, out of compassion for the world, for the good welfare and happiness of devas and humans. And who is that? The Tathagata, the Buddha, the Arhat, the perfectly enlightened one. That is the one person. And then he tends to repeat these things a little bit, and a lot of these we'll see things repeated, and I'll leave out some of those repetitions, and Bodhi Bhikkhu has left out some of them as well. I'll leave out more than he did. And so in the second paragraph there, this one person who is unique, without peer, counterpart, incompatible, unequaled, matchless, unrivaled, the best of humans, the Tathagata, the Arhat, the perfect enlightened one. And so then the manifestation of great vision, great light, and great radiance is what comes from this. The 6 things, and then there's a list of things. So he mentions the manifestation of the 6 things unsurpassed. Now it doesn't list those. There's no footnote on that or anything. So I looked it up. Those are seeing, hearing, gain, service, training, and recollection. That's not a list I had run across anywhere else before. And then there's the 4 analytic knowledges, penetration of the elements, realization of the fruit of knowledge and liberation, realization of the fruits of stream entry, once returning, non-returning, and arhatship. So those are parts of the development of the 5 paths, the last one being a Buddha. And so then the Tathagata, the Arhat, and the perfectly enlightened one is the one person that has done this. So that's the main point. There's only one person that has done this, and so he's bringing this, his purpose is to bring this to benefit us. And then the second one is the Buddha's conception and birth. So this is the story of the Buddha's conception and his birth. It doesn't include all of the elements that we see in some of the stories, but it includes a lot of these elements. So then it starts out, thus I have heard, which is common wording that we often see at the beginning of these, not all of them, but many of them. And it talks about monks sitting in the assembly hall. We have Ananda, and then he's interrupted. He's talking with Ananda, and so he's interrupted, and so then the Blessed One came out of meditation when it was evening. He went to the assembly hall. Oh wait, it wasn't the Buddha that was talking to him, but there was a group of monks, and Ananda was among the monks, and they were talking in the assembly hall. So the Buddha was off meditating. He woke up and he comes back into the assembly hall and sat down. Then he addressed the monks. And so they go through this discussion. And then he addressed Ananda and talks about explaining more fully some of this, and the idea of the Bodhisattva appearing in Tushita heaven here. So he's explaining this background, and then it remained in Tushita heaven for some period of time. Going to page 52, he passed away from the Tushita heaven and descended into his mother's womb. There's this immeasurable great radiance that appeared in the world. A 10,000-fold world system shook, quaked, and trembled. And again, this great radiance appeared. Then there were 4 young devas that came to guard him at the 4 quarters so that no humans or non-humans or anyone at all could harm the Bodhisattva or his mother. Now, it was reminiscent a little bit of the 4 gates that we see in Tantra at the palaces and the 4 cardinal directions around the outside and the protectors that are there. And then in number 9, in his mother's womb, he became intrinsically virtuous, refraining from killing living beings, taking what is not given, sexual misconduct, false speech, wines, liquors, and intoxicants, the basis of negligence. So the 5 precepts. there. The last one of which, here it's a little bit more specific, but in general what he's talking about is this idea of things that cause us to be negligent. So alcohol can cause us to be negligent, drugs can cause us to be negligent, but so can other kinds of sensual pleasures. And so we talked about that on the first week of how these things can also apply to a variety of different things there. And then in the last one, number 14, he goes on and talks about the Bodhisattva's mother gave him birth after carrying him in the womb for 10 months. The next page, the Bodhisattva's mother gave birth to him standing up. The first devas then received him, then human beings. In number 17, he did not touch the earth. The 4 young devas received him and set him before his mother, saying, "Rejoice, O queen, son of great power has been born to you." And then in 18, from his mother's womb he came forth, unsullied, unsmeared by water, humors, blood, or any kind of impurity, clean and unsullied. In 19, 2 jets of water appeared to pour forth from the sky. And 1 cool, 1 warm for bathing the Bodhisattva and his mother. In 20, as soon as the Bodhisattva was born, pay attention here, he stood firmly with his feet on the ground. Okay, number 17, he didn't touch the ground, but now he's on the ground. Then he took the 7 steps facing north, and a white parasol held over him. He surveyed each quarter and uttered the words of the leader of the herd. "I am the highest in the world. I am the best in the world. I am the foremost in the world. This is my last birth. Now there is no renewed existence for me." Now the odds are that that got added into the story a little bit later, because when we look at the story of his actual enlightenment activity, that's where he goes through the process of discovering that this is his last birth. So we see some things here that, if you're going to be real picky, okay, you see things that contradict each other in the stories. And again, I would emphasize the idea of not getting too caught up in that kind of detail and minutia as a part of that, and look for the things that you find helpful. And then we go on in 21, an immeasurable great radiance surpassing the divine majesty of the devas appear in the world. And then an immeasurable great radiance surpassing the divine majesty of the devas, and then this 10,000-fold world system shook, quaked, and trembled. So we get that once more. And then in 22, that being so, Ananda remembered this too. For the Tathagata feelings are known as they arise, and they are present as they disappear. Perceptions are known as they arise, are present as they disappear. Thoughts are known as they arise, as they are present as they disappear. So going back here, so the coming and going principle that we've talked about before in other classes, and things related to the aggregates and so forth are all included as a part of this. So that's some basic information about him and the basic story about his birth. As I said, there are other sources that include a few other elements, like the white elephant, for example, that you may have heard, that has become integrated into the story in some places and so forth. So then we go on to number 3 here, the quest for enlightenment. So the first, and this is the one that's broken in, there's actually 3 different sections that are broken in here, 3 different, different sources from the sutras that are included here, put together in this section on the quest for enlightenment. So the first one is the seeking the supreme state of sublime peace. So he begins by saying, "Monks, there are these 2 kinds of search, the noble search and the ignoble search." What is the ignoble search? Here someone, being himself subject to birth, seeks what is also subject to birth. Being himself subject to aging, he seeks what is also subject to aging. And then he goes through sickness and death and sorrow and defilement the same way. And so these different things that happen from the, what he calls the ignoble search. Okay, so this is the one without being enlightened or having received the teachings and so forth. And so then, and what may be said to the subject of birth, aging, sickness, and death, to sorrow and defilement? Wife and children, men and women, slaves, goats and sheep, fowl and pigs, elephants, cattle, horses, mares, gold and silver. So all of these kinds of acquisitions, if you will, that you could attain as a part of that. And so then we become caught up in our attachment to those things that we get. And then in number 12, and what is the noble search? So how does that contrast here? Subject to birth, the one subject to birth seeks unborn supreme security from bondage, nirvana. Being himself subject to aging, he seeks the supreme security from the bondage, nirvana. Being subject to sickness, he seeks nirvana. Being subject to death, he seeks nirvana. Being subject to sorrow, he seeks nirvana. Being subject to defilement, he seeks nirvana. This is the noble search. So instead of just getting caught up in them, we choose to follow the path related to understanding those and overcoming those kinds of attachments. And then in 13, monks, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an enlightened bodhisattva, I too, being myself subject to birth, sought what was also subject to birth, subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement. I sought what was also subject to all of these things. Then I considered thus: why do I seek what is also subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement? Suppose that, having understood the danger, I seek the unborn supreme security from bondage, nirvana. And then in 14, later, while still young, a black-haired young man endowed with the blessing of youth in the prime of life, through my mother and father, wished otherwise, and swept with tearful faces. I shaved my hair and beard. Didn't know he had a beard. Put on the ochre robe and went forth from the home life into homelessness. So he became homeless, basically. So he became a monk. And then, 15, having gone forth, monks in search of what was wholesome, seeking the supreme state of sublime peace, I went to Alara Kalama. This was his first teacher. And asked him for training, and he replied, "The Venerable One may stay here. This Dharma is such that the wise man can soon enter upon and dwell in it, realizing for himself through direct knowledge his own teacher's doctrine." I quickly learned that Dharma. So he did that, but very quickly mastered all of those teachings. And then in the next paragraph, then I went to Alara Kalama and asked him, "Friend Kalama, in what way do you declare that by realizing it for yourself with direct knowledge you enter upon and dwell in this Dhamma?" In reply, he declared the base of nothingness. This is the third formless absorption. And then, skipping a paragraph, go to the one at the bottom, I soon quickly entered upon and dwelled in that Dhamma by realizing it for myself with direct knowledge. So he mastered it himself. Then I went to Alara Kalama and asked him, "Friend Kalama, it is in this way that you declare that you enter upon and dwell in this Dharma and realize it for yourself with direct knowledge?" "That is the way, friend." And so then he says to the Buddha, not a Buddha yet, "Come, friend, let us now lead this community together." So he had mastered it, so he's asking the Buddha in his pre-Buddha form to join the community to become another teacher along with him. Thus Alara Kalama, my teacher, placed me, his pupil, on equal footing with himself and awarded me the highest honor. But it occurred to me, this Dhamma does not lead to disenchantment, to passion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nirvana, but only to rebirth in the base of nothingness. Not being satisfied with that Dhamma, disappointed with it, I left. So then he moves on to his second teacher. I went to Udaka Ramaputta. And so he also quickly learned that one. And then he went back to him and asked him, "Friend, in what way did Rama declare that by realizing it for himself with direct knowledge he entered upon and dwelled in this Dhamma?" In reply, Udaka Ramaputta declared the base of neither perception nor non-perception. This is the fourth of the formless absorptions. And so then, going to the next page, 58, I soon quickly entered upon, dwelled in that Dhamma, and realizing it for myself with direct knowledge. Then I went to Udaka Ramaputta and asked him, "Friend, was it in this way that the Rama declared that he entered upon and dwelled in this Dhamma by realizing it for himself with direct knowledge?" "That is the way, friend." And then he goes on and says, "As Rama was, so you are. As you are, so is Rama. Come, friend, now lead this community." And then the Buddha, in his form, "Thus, Udaka Ramaputta, my fellow monk, placed me in the position of the teacher and accorded me the highest honor. But it occurred to me, this Dhamma does not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nirvana, but only to rebirth in the base of neither perception nor non-perception. Not being satisfied with that Dhamma, disappointed with it, I left." Okay, so he's now gone to these two teachers who are considered to be some of the best teachers available, and he leaves dissatisfied that he has not achieved what he was after. So he goes on in number 17 here, "Still in search, monks, of what is wholesome, seeking the supreme state of sublime peace, I wandered by stages through the Magadhan country until eventually I arrived at Uruvela, near another town. Won't try that one. There I saw an agreeable piece of ground, a delightful grove with clear flowing river, with pleasant smooth banks, and a nearby village for alms resort." So a place where he could go to collect alms in order to sustain himself. And then he sat down there thinking, this will serve for striving. So striving to achieve his enlightenment. Now, here is where it omits all of the stuff about the ascetic practices. Okay? So number 18 then says, "Then monks, being myself subject to birth, having understood the danger in what this is subject to birth, seeking the unborn supreme security from bondage, nirvana, I attained the unborn supreme security from bondage, nirvana." So he's attained it. Okay? He sat down in this pleasant place and attained it. Nothing about asceticism whatsoever. Okay? And at the very end says, "The knowledge and vision arose in me. My liberation is unshakable. This is my last birth." So here's the example I was talking about before. This is when this arose to him in this case. "Now there is no more renewed existence." Okay? So he's broken the samsaric wheel of turning as a part of that. Okay, let's take a little break here.